Okay.
Yeah, great. Um, could you please share a bit of your role in providing care or support for people living with dementia?
I was an aged carer for many, many, many years in a facility-based structure back when we used to have wards, large wards, 4 and 8, and eventually it's become two-bed wards. I pulled back from that when my father became terminally ill, and at the time I believe he had dementia, but he had cancer, which is what everyone's focus was, so they treated that. Whereas myself being the carer, I knew straight away, no, this isn't right. This isn't who he is. He's losing. But at that time, I can understand the focus was treatment and cause you know, and so after that, I found that I was very burnt out by the system. I found a little bit let down. So I removed myself from that. And so I've recently come back to supporting people in their homes. I work with disabilities as well. So because nothing much physically bothers me, I've been a aged care, so I've seen everything. Given, end of life, I'm the kind of person that you want there because nothing bothers me. I don't get offended. If you're having a bad day, I meet the person where they are, do what I need to, and then I go. So I've started coming back into that.
Okay, so you were a primary carer for your father?
I did. When my father retired, the 2 years leading up to it, he was very unwell. He was starting to do things. Man who never had an accident in his life had a couple of accidents. He started doing unusual things which I knew weren't the normal him, and so I was trying to get the health professionals to look deeper. But then when they looked deeper, they found his cancer, so that stopped that.
Mm.
But by that stage, I was supporting him, which became up until he was put into palliative care. Up until that point, I was with him daily, all day with my young children. That was just what it was. So yeah, until he was moved interstate because my family and my brother lived interstate. So sadly, his last turn was actually in a new environment, which I think became very toxic because it was a huge transition. He had to go on a boat, he had to go in a car, go to a new people, and it was a more hospital environment. Where in Launceston, Tasmania, our palliative care was, even though it's a home, it was like a unit. It was a little, he had all his pictures there, he had his quilt cover there, he had his knickknacks, we had his music. And even though we had the health professionals, it was still his own space. But the transition to a palliative in like a hospital-based care was not a very good fit, and he went downhill very, very, very quickly.
Mm.
So I think it wasn't just the fact that his body was deteriorating. I think the fact his mind, it was too much for both.
Okay. Um, so I just want to ask you if you could tell me or you could remember
Mm-hmm.
like how long you care for your father and how long you work in aged care, the facility, and how long you've been working in the community. Because it sounds like you have very extensive care experience. I just want to know maybe the period if you can remember.
I worked in facility-based care, so aged care. I worked up until my second child was born, so probably 15 years.
Wow.
Because I was a teenager when I started working. So I was a young adult, got married. That was my first job kind of thing. So I was very young. And then by my second child, I stopped because my father had become retired, and I spent those couple years caring for him until he got the diagnosis and up until he died, which is when my next child was born. So I had a break for a little while because I was, young children, and it was a bit hard. I've been working in the community 12 years now, gradually as my child was younger, increasing hours to be, that's now what I do, and I'll do that up until I'm qualified and then see what else I want to do. So I have had a lot of years experience.
Yes, I
Yeah,
can
yeah.
tell.
I'm 50 now, so I've been doing, other than my break for my between my second and my fourth child, I've been working, in this kind of in the care environment, support worker, used to be personal carer, used to be extended carer. We've had multiple, and I'm sure there'll be another role and another title, but that's what I'm called at the moment, support worker.
Okay. Um, I just wondering why you are interested in this project.
I think actually, as a person who was coming into aged care and elderly, and I didn't have a lot of understanding of how the brain change and how the body change and aging process. I didn't understand that a lot. And I found watching my other work colleagues be very dismissive, I found that very hard. Instead, they were judging the now, not understanding the person. And I personally really found that hard to deal with. So when I started doing my undergraduate course, I started listening to uni students and young people, and I realized that they've never seen, they've never heard, they actually don't know what it's like. People go, oh my gosh, you've looked after a person, that means you showered them. Well, yes, I do shower them, and yes, I can wash them, and I can completely change them, and I can do things that people, wouldn't. But I do for that person what they can't do for themselves. And I think people need to know that the individual is still the individual. They're just unable to do a lot more. And I found, especially last year when I started dementia, a lot of these young people coming through don't actually understand the caring side of the role. And of course, I've done that my whole life. And so I kind of wanted to put a perspective of someone who's been there and done that, to know that it is very normal, and it's not an ugly thing. It's not a dirty thing. It's not a terrible thing. It is a hard thing, but I don't think it's a sad thing. I think it's a privilege more. That's how I see it. And I kind of wanted it. People are coming into it for a job, and I want them to understand it's more than just a job. I always cared for people like it was my family, or that was my neighbor, that was someone who's very important, rather than it's just someone who I have one of these people that I have to care for, and then I have to go off and write my notes. It becomes impersonal. So I want people to understand that if you angle your brain to it, you can be a much better support worker and a carer for your family if you kind of remove the veil and make it personal. What's personal to you? So yeah, after I listen to these young people, I'm like, oh no, that's not, no.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Um, so this project actually is called Altered Realities. Um, can you describe what you think altered realities means in the context of dementia care?
From a person looking out, it's seeing someone behave in a way that you personally wouldn't be behaving or wouldn't understand and comprehend. For the individual, I think it's enacting into their actual reality, their now. So their reactions and their speech and their behavior is to do with what is happening to them, and they believe truly that is what is happening.
I see. So the next question I would like to ask a little bit deeper of this concept. So please share your experiences in responding to people living with dementia who experience the altered realities. Any situations or any experiences that you can recall?
With my father, I think the one that I remember the most wasn't that it was out of the ordinary for me, but it was the first time my family saw this from him. He kept touching people's clothing. He was touching, if you came in to see, he was doing this, and people didn't really notice, but I thought, my dad's not a very touchy person, what's going on? And what he was doing is wiping it away, and he actually thought there was a spider. So people came to them, he was sure there were spiders on them. So he was actually wiping the spider away. And when they came closer, he'd see spiders, and and they're getting kind of like, Dad, stop doing that. Or, Pat, don't do that. And I was like, no, there's something, obviously he's focusing and he was touching, but it wasn't male or female or what there was a reason he was doing something. And so that was when I really realized how, instead of considering why he was doing that or what, there must have been a reason. It was like, stop doing it. What's wrong with you? And to him, he seriously thought people had spiders on them, and he was trying to brush them off. And I was like, when I finally got it, the conversation, and I could piece together what he wanted, I just said, is it crawling on me, Dad? And he's like, they just keep coming. And I was like, okay. I said, well, should I take my jumper off? But then when I took my jumper off and I went back a little bit further, he was like, no, you're fine now. So obviously, as a person came closer, obviously the spiders were in his mind and they were coming. I'm wondering if he thought they were coming to him. But all day he kept brushing people, and it was really upsetting to see how people treated his, they were kind of rejecting what it was. And he thought he was trying to help them. He honestly felt he was trying to help them. And that was when I really clicked. I went, 100% my father has dementia. I don't care what you say, forget about his cancer. This is definitely where he's at. So from then onwards, when I tried to talk to my family, I was trying to say, look, if this is what he's doing, there's obviously something going on. Oh, he's just being stupid. It's just the medication. And I'm like, oh.
Okay. How long
Yeah.
did you see him doing it?
I remember probably 3 or 4 months leading up to it, he'd started doing things himself or wiping the table. And he was, we lived near the bush, we lived near a reserve, so there's always bugs and things. And, you know, he'd bring in wood and there'd be all kinds of weird and wonderful things coming in off the wood. And I didn't think much of it, but then I realized he was actually doing it to himself. So probably maybe before we went into palliative care, I'd noticed he'd start brushing things off, or he'd go open his car door before he'd come in and he'd dust it down. So I think it was a few months leading up to it before he was finally in the, sorry, I'll just tell my husband, hold on, I'll just tell him, hold on. Hi, Peter, I'm just on a phone call. I'll be back in a second. But you know how you can have it all day free and then the moment you do something, someone calls you. So that was really interesting to me because it wasn't interfering with me in any way, but when I realized that it became almost like a habit and it was within proximity, so he wouldn't see it, he'd be walking around, but when he went to near a seat, he'd dust it. Or if he was near a table, he started dusting it. And that's when the last few times he started touching people, I realized it was obviously something to him that was very, very real that he had to deal with.
So he was basically wiping off
Getting the
people's
spiders,
clothes and their
people's clothes.
surfaces.
It was,
Surfaces.
yes,
Yeah.
and yeah, because he was doing it to like the tables and chairs and the car seat. And
So at the time, what was your approach to these situations when your father was doing it?
I would do the same. I'll go, okay. If he was dusting the seat, I'd reach over and I'd dust it as well, because I knew that he wouldn't sit down until he dusted it. So I'd wipe it over and I'd go, oh, good. And then he'd just, when he in his head said, yep, that's good, he would sit down. Or when he'd start doing the tablecloth, I'd do it as well. I just thought, if this seems to be like it was a pattern. That was how he settled. He wouldn't settle until the table was dusted or his chair was dusted. So it was just kind of, to me, I thought it was a self-soothing, like a bit of a habit. That's originally what I thought it was. He was having a bit of a habit, just kind of a bit of control over his life, because he didn't have a license. He wasn't working anymore. He lost his control. So my thought was it was some little bit of normality for him and a bit of routine that he was in charge of.
Did you find that approach was effective?
It was for me, because everyone would rush him, get in the car, get on the seat, things like that. And he wasn't someone who would be rushed. So to me, it was like, well, this is what he needs to do. I'm like, yes, we're running late or whatever, but me rushing him and getting him panicky, he'd get very, he wasn't able to control himself. He got very panicked. So to me, it would take 2 seconds. It's just like a person when I work with, she used to like a curtain open, 1, 2, 3. And then we'd open it. And if you just opened it, she'd be absolute, but she liked numbers of 3. She had patterns of 3. That was her condition, or that was her OCD from her life. So I just had to open her curtains 3 times and she would be fine. But if you open her curtain once, she could not. And, back in the day, carers weren't always the nicest people and we're all impatient and time. They just rip open her curtains. But if I could do her curtains 3 times, she'd quite happily get up and get dressed and go to the bathroom, go out and have breakfast. But if she didn't, she really couldn't get dressed and she couldn't cope with it. Her routine hadn't been set. So I guess it was just normal. I just did it.
Okay. So is there any situation that nothing worked?
When he was in the hospital bed in the end, when he couldn't move away, do you know what I mean? He was in a bed and he had the rails and, people were sitting around him, and he was kind of in and out of consciousness, and he couldn't do it. When he wasn't able to do it, he'd get very antsy, and they'd be like, do you need the toilet, or do you need that, or do you need to give him drugs? And so I just brushed him. I brushed his bed linen because he was in his hospital bed by then. And it was like, because he couldn't get his hands to do what he wanted, but his agitation was obviously unable to control his body. So, I mean, I was heavily pregnant, big fat tummy trying to go over him. And I just try to, it was almost like, to me, I was just telling them I'm just straightening his bed covers. I didn't need to say what I was doing. I didn't think I needed to justify it. And I also didn't want to say things because he could hear. And I didn't want to say I'm dusting the spiders away. I just wanted to say, oh, look, he just needs to have everything straightened. So that was how I dealt with it, because my family were in denial of dementia. That wasn't what it is. He was dying of cancer, and that was it. And the doctors didn't want to know that. That wasn't what it was. He was terminally ill. His body was shutting down. Whereas to me, this was part of his, and it had been part of his routine. It had been leading up to it. So when he got really agitated, I just literally wiped down his bed, and that seemed to soothe him.
I see. So,
He'd be in and out of conscious, and he'd come to conscious, and he'd just you could see his body, and his eyes would go wild, like he was like really fearful, and they'd be like, oh, drug him, and I just literally, and it calmed him down. And they just thought it was like like a there for a baby. I think they thought I was doing that, but what I really was doing is just brushing down his bed covers, because I brushed down the table, and I brushed down the chair, and I brushed down the car, because that seemed to be what he needed, and that's just what I did. But to explain that to the nurse and explain that to my family, I couldn't. Yeah, it was a bit of a stressful time for me, because I knew, but I wasn't qualified as at the time. Carers are just carers, and we don't know anything. That's a nurse's job. So it was really hard. But I do remember he just woke up with this fearful panic, and but that stopped him right in the end. That was just a settle. It was like, okay, I'll wash them away, without me saying, the spiders are gone, Dad, it's okay. Yeah, but that was the last week or two when he was bedbound and couldn't move, and he couldn't control his body. That was very hard. And that seemed to settle him. So that's what I assumed is what he needed, and that's what I did.
and then it worked.
It worked.
Okay. So, so what, if anything, if there is anything to affect your choice of how to respond to these situations, what made you that will work to that situation?
I was just trying to mirror what he was doing. Obviously, there was a reason for what he was doing. I didn't need to understand it. I just needed to see what I could do to calm him. So if that was what he was wanting to do, and that seemed to be something he was focused on, I thought if I could focus on it too and be involved, then that knew that we were there together. So that's what I did it for. Whether it was right or wrong, he didn't slap my hand away or tell me to go away or get grumpy, and my dad could get very grumpy. Yeah, it just kind of, it just seemed to be the right thing to do. Whether someone told me, it wasn't anyone told me, it just seemed to be what he wanted to do. So I decided that I'd do it too.
So do you think that your understanding of knowing your father influence the how you respond?
Um, well, it was a weird thing because my father wasn't very touchy. So for me to have to touch him was a very hard thing for me, because he wasn't a, so when he was brushing down his clothes and things like that, I'd go and do that. That was very odd. He wouldn't have gone and fixed my jacket, and he wouldn't have asked me to fix his tie or do up a button. That was very hands off. So it was kind of hard for me to do, but it's the only thing I could think of at the time. That was his focus, that I should be my focus with him.
I see. So, and then when you made that decision, like a brushing off, wiping off, and trying to understand his word at the time, did you think about his emotional state or cognitive ability, anything that you had in mind?
All I could think about this is where he is now, and I had to be where he was now. So when I'd worked in aged care, it depends with the resident. There were certain times you'd walk in and they'd throw something at you, and other times they'd greet you. It really depended on the day. So you just kind of always greeted each person in each day with this is what it is, and I would take what was presented to me. I've never really taken offense or bothered. So if he hadn't been happy with it, I would have worked on something else, or I would have given him a cloth or something, because that was his fixation at the time. So to me, if that was what he was fixated on, then that was just what we were going to do. It was like, also he had to get up and put his boots on, and he didn't do slippers. He wore his Blunstones 100%. And when he used to lift his foot, I used to think, okay, he wants his shoes on. So I took his Blunstones, which he'd worn forever, because in hospital they didn't like putting shoes on. So what I'd do is I'd try to, when he'd get up in the morning, I'd take off his slippers and I'd put his Blunstones on. And that seemed to a normality that was a part of his mind that had always been there. So me putting his Blunstones on, because him sitting in a hospital chair or, in a waiting room, he seemed to be, wasn't like he was getting up. It's like his feet couldn't stop. And so I realized very early on that they were putting slippers on him. And I'm like, my dad's never worn slippers in my whole entire being, unless, they were gifted to him on Christmas Day or something. And so I just started putting his Blunstones on, and it was like, I think I was assuming in a way it was the weight on his feet. They're quite heavy because they were steel cap boots, because that's, my father worked in the bush. And so even though he hadn't been working for a number of years, me putting his Blunstones on, I was just assuming it was the weight and the comfort of something familiar. I was going with familiar. My father never wore T-shirts. So when they started wearing T-shirts, I'd be like, you have to put a shirt on. No, it's too hard. I said, you have to put a shirt on, put a hard jacket shirt on. You can't don't put track pants. He doesn't wear track pants. Put hard jacket on. This is what he's worn as long as I can remember. Those little things. So, I understand as a carer, putting on what's easiest. Your trackies, what you can pull up, and your T-shirts. He was never going to be that man. So, and he lost a lot of weight, which means it was really easy to dress him. I'm like, you have to put these clothes on. It was almost like the moment he had his work trousers on and his work shirt, even though he hadn't worked, but having those boots on, it was like he was calm, but without it, he wasn't. And he could address the situation. He would go to the table, or he'd come in the car, or he'd go to an appointment if he had all these things that were normal to him. So I was dressed up and so my family are like, he's really sick, he's having his treatments and he's in the machines having all those tubes. And I'd be like, don't put him in slippers and track pants and a hoodie. You just don't do that to my father. So little things like that, it was like an uphill battle, because I remember in the nursing home when we were there and people would come in and there was women, beautiful, they had their pearls and they'd have their little buttons and they had their tweed skirts and they'd worn tights or stockings their whole life, and then all of a sudden they came in and put that, they'd be very aggressive. And it was simply a matter of their body had changed. And I was like, but why can't we, and so then we started slipping up the back of their shirts or their blouses, or slipping up the side of a skirt, and we put a pin on it because we couldn't do it up. And I know we had, I was very lucky. I was in a small nursing home. We had a nurse who was a weekend nurse, so she wasn't there during the week, but the evenings and weekends, and she'd be like, let's just get the scissors and just cut this with beautiful tweed skirts, and we just slip them in these silk shirts. But once we dressed these women in the clothes that they were comfortable with, and, we put the shoes on and they were a bit shaky, but that was what they wore. What was presented with these women were refined women who, if they had been their whole life, not aggressive, scratching, clawing women who occasionally did come. And it was quite simply because that was who they were, and being allowed to who they were. So I was a bit of an advocate. We had a lot of arguments in my workplace. I was quite young and used to get in trouble for having an opinion, but I've noticed things like that. If a person came in and you see their photos and this is how they're dressed, and then all of a sudden we're putting them in, the easy slip crossover tops, and, it was a dignity thing. And I think a dignity, I've had complete bedbound, I've had terminally ill people, and I've had people on death's door, and yes, you're completely caring for them, but if they had their favorite things, and you could actually tell a person's body the moment you had them dressed, even if they're sitting in that bed in that chair all day, I'd just simply get them dressed, put them on their bed on top of their blanket with a rug, and they'd be much calmer than being in bed, being all dressed up and acting out. So I always thought you'd see photos of them, or you'd see them coming from the units to the low care to high care. I was a high care, I was end of care carer, and I used to remember them walking down with their walkers in their tweed skirts, or he'd wear his Sunday best on Sunday, and now all of a sudden we're dressing them in pajamas. And I always found that really insulting. So I'd be the first one to say, let's get them dressed in their Sunday best, or let's put the tweed on, or let's put his, like my dad's hijacker stuff on. And I could see that that was really important. And I saw that the changes in the mental, that their reactions were completely different when they were treated as they were, with dignity, not a number. So that's, that still holds me.
Mm-hmm.
We can make anything work. You really can as a carer. It's amazing what you can do supporting a person with, that you can find ways. You just have to compromise. And I think that's one thing people need to learn is you've got to compromise. There's always a way to work something around, it might not be perfectly what they want and what you want, but you really can help that person to be where they were. So, yeah.
Okay. I think you mentioned briefly earlier, say that some staff or some of the family members didn't understand how to
Yep.
respond or maybe right approach to the situation. And maybe some people might say that's not correcting people or not telling the truth to the
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
Is like affecting a lie. I mean, like it's a lying to people. I mean, what are your thoughts on this? For example, your daddy's situation, your father's situation, he
Mhm.
was wiping off clothes and then he thought there are spiders. He basically do that to help others. And then other people might think that just tell your dad there is no spider. But
Mm.
how would you think? I mean, just your thought on this.
One of the nurses said, just before I had a doctor, and I was quite lucky, the doctor who, his final doctor was in Launceston in Tasmania, and she'd actually moved to the hospital or the place that we were at, and she knew my dad. And the moment she came in, his care changed almost overnight because she knew him previously. But we had one nurse, and she'd be like, it's not. She'd get really, really cross. And I said, but it is there. It is there. No, there's not a spider. Stop being stupid. And I was like, there is a spider there, and we're getting rid of the spider, and that's all there is. And it was, I was told I was rude, but I was like, no, there is a spider, and he's dusting it off. And if you don't want him to dust it off, then you need to go back. All you have to do is step back. If he can't reach you, he doesn't see the spiders. I said, if you come within his vision, which was about reach, he saw spiders. But if you were, by the door or at the end of the bed, he didn't see spiders. But if you were close to him, you had spiders. And she'd be like, he doesn't have spiders. You're being stupid. We're inside. Da, 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 da. And I was like, my father's seeing spiders. He's seeing spiders. That's it. Whereas my brother and sister would be like, Kirsty, you're being stupid. My big brother and his wife, they came in, let's care for dad. And I think I was too impersonal. I think they found I was accepting that he was going to die. And I guess that's a mindset. I knew that my father was terminally ill and I knew he was going to die, and that was happening. And they were all in the denial. No, we're going to give him treatment, and no, we're going to give him medication. He's going to last another 4 months, another 6 months, another 12 months. And I said, he might not last 2 days. He might last 2 weeks. He might last 2 months, but he is dying, and that's it. And so my mindset was very considered negative for my family, because they were like, we want to push through, we want to get through. And I was like, his body and I can see his mind going. I was placing things back to 6 months ago, 12 months ago. He had Blunstones, loved my Blunstones. My dad loved my Blunstone. He had the ones he chopped wood with. He had his good Blunstones. He had his work Blunstone. He had a new packet. And one day he wore a pair of Blunstones that were odd. Now, he wore a new Blunstone and he wore his work Blunstones, and they were different. And to me, that was a real show that I knew something. That was my moment. I went, there is something going on with my dad. That was my clarity point. And so when I went to his doctor and I said, look, something is going on within my dad, I said, this is not something. He goes, oh, he said to me, oh, it was dark. He's probably rushing. I said, no, no, no. My dad is a man of habit. I said, that is his appointment. He's coming to the doctor today. That shoe there, I said, that shoe is the one he wears to cut wood. I said, they are not the same pair. They are not. I said, forget the brand. That shows me right now something is going on with my father, 100%. And they were like, it was an uphill battle, but to me that was my clarity point. That was like, I knew things were going on with my dad. He'd had a few accidents. He'd left the stove on, all those. We have a combustion stove. I lived in an old house, so wood, heated the hot water, he had a stove top. He lived in very old, he didn't live like power. He lived old ways, and he nearly burnt the house down. And that was like, oh, my dad doesn't make mistakes with the stove, but the day he wore his clothing wrong was the day to me I knew there was something more than, it wasn't cancer. Forget the cancer, that just came on. That just came on and took over. But when I spoke to my family about the dementia, when I spoke to the nurse, he's definitely seeing that. This is where he is. She was like, he's just being stupid. He's just being stupid. He's just touching. He's being a dirty old man. I was like, never, ever, ever, ever talk about my father like that in front of me or in front of him, because she was talking to me in his room. And as far as I was concerned, she wasn't actually even acknowledging that he was there. And that really bothered me. If I had a problem and she had a problem, we could have gone out. But the fact that she was in his room talking like he was like that in front of him as if he was a nobody, health professional wise, that's a very big, you don't do that. You're paid to do your job and keep your opinions, but to talk as if a person wasn't there, like they're invisible, that was a really big issue. For me, they'd come in, they'd check his bloods, or they'd poke this or shove the tablet in. He was just this, no, hi Pat, how you going? Or Pat, I'm here to give you tablet time. Or needle, sometimes you'd have it administered without actually talking to him. And I used to really, that upsets me.
I understand what you mean. Yeah. Were you the person very close to your father? You had a better understanding of his background and preference compared to other members in your family, or
I accepted my father's ways a lot more than other people. He was just the
Mm,
way he was,
I
and
see.
he didn't want a social, whereas my family would be like, come out, come and do this, and they'd
Mm,
buy him stuff and give him stuff. And I was like, that's a waste of money. So to them, it was like, oh, he's going to retire. He's going to be so much more active. He's going to do this and he's
mm,
going to do that. And I was like, well, why would my dad do that now when he's never done that? He's never been that person.
mm,
Um, they wanted him to come into the age. They brought him a smart TV and it nearly killed him at that time. He was someone who changed the channels, and he liked his old TV that he could change. And and they got him a microwave with oh goodness, I still own it, to help him. And to him, it was an insult. He was happy with his life. He was happy with the way he'd lived. He lived simply, and he liked living simply. And
mm.
yeah, my family couldn't understand that, whereas I just respected it. I didn't have to agree. I don't have to agree with someone to respect that. And I guess that's the difference between me and my family. I found even now, especially now that I'm with my mother and my family, I don't have to like the way she is, but that's just the way she is. But them trying to make me, them trying to change me how I do things, I'm like, well, no, this is who I am, accept it. So yeah, my family and I are quite different.
I see. Is your view always being like that, or have you actually noticed any changes in your view or the approach to the situation, or you are always like that person, and then it has been like this in um just all the time, over the time?
I was always someone who wanted to help people. I was always very quiet in the background, and I was observant, whereas my family will like get in and get it done and, center of attention, whereas I'm not that person. I don't need to be center of attention. I might get an award. I'm not going to go, guess everyone, I just got an award. Like when going to university and I got my certificate, I didn't go, hey, everyone, look at this. Whereas everyone else would be like, hey, look at what I'm doing. Facebook, I can tell them what they're doing every day. I've always been a different person. I've been more private. Just, I don't need to know everyone's business. If you want to tell me something, that is fine. But I don't need to spread the gossip. I'm not a gossipy and my family's kind of more a gossipy, no, there's no secret. And I'm not that person. So I am very, very different from my family, and I have been different my whole life. As I've gotten older, I think it annoys them more because I haven't changed. But as a carer, it just kind of felt natural to me. Like, I've been a carer since I was young. I used to volunteer at the hospital and in aged care before I started working, whereas my family are like, ooh, why would you do that? And because my grandfather was older and I used to care for him. And then when he went to nursing home, I just started volunteering at the nursing home because I wanted to be close to him, and I just thought that was something that needed to be done, whereas my family would never do that.
I see.
My sister-in-law has a chronic illness where she needs a lot of support and needs a lot of medication and walkers, and she has a lot of lifelong conditions. And she's like, poor me, look at me. Oh, we have to. Whereas she came to me, when she stayed with me, I got her up and I got her dressed and I got her organized. Didn't even think of it, didn't blink it. And everyone's like, why would you do that? And I'm like, because I can. Whereas she's like, oh, I need carers and I need that. And I'm like, well, you don't need them while you're here. I can do that
Right.
because I can, and because I don't really get put off by anything, whatever a person needs right then. Is, I suppose I have 4 children, so I've had 4 children, so no different than changing a nappy for a child than what someone needs to be doing, or feeding someone who's young, or someone who themselves can't hold their hand and has the shakes. It's just wherever I've always met a person where they're at, and I'm quite happy just to have company. I don't need them to sit and know their life story, and they don't need to know mine, whereas other people need to know everything. So I guess that's where I'm very different from my family.
So is it okay if I interpret your approach is that you accept the person at the time? You don't really need to know about the person in the past, but you just do the best approach at the time in that situation? Or do you explain a bit differently?
It depends where I've run into the person. If I'm meeting someone the here and now, this is who you are now, this is who I meet. If when I was caring and working for people, I really like to talk to their families, specifically their spouses, when we had the spouses in, because the spouses would tell you, which is how I knew they wore their tweed or they had their sherry at night, or how Sunday they like to sit and, wear their best. But knowing where the person where they are now, and greeting them where they're, and knowing if your approach doesn't work, usually it's because where I think they are isn't where they are at the time. So you simply have to kind of work out where they are. What is it that's bothering them? What's on their mind? And it is, it's trial and error. Okay, that hadn't worked. That's not what it is. What is it? What can we do? What are we looking at? Why are we wondering? We had a lot of, so I have, when aged care was, I am old now, but there used to be, it's called the screamers. So they were people that would scream. We had people that were fully bedbound, they were fully dependent, completely dependent, fed and everything like that. And they would scream and scream, and they were called the screamers. And we had a main wing, and it was called screamers. And then we had the wanderers, and they were titled. And yes, these people screamed, and they did, but they didn't always scream. Maybe when we got them out of bed and we got them dressed and we put them by the window, they could look, they didn't scream so much. But all they did was the people would get them up, fed, and they'd shut the door. And I'd be like, but it was accepted. This is just what they were. It's like, oh, the dementia, they've got the crazies. And I'd be like, I don't know about that. But at the time I was very young, and at the time it was very unusual for someone my age to be in aged care. Usually people went into aged care after they'd had children, easy job, set hours, off you go. But sometimes it was really hard to find people's histories. Sometimes when they're in the homes, you really had no information. They'd broken a hip or something had happened and they were there, but you didn't have visitors. Their personal charts didn't always have their history. So it is very, very hard. So, someone would turn their TV off. Was it because they was deaf, or was it because their partner was deaf and they're used to having the TV up really loud? Like those little things, once you find out, a lot of things make sense. So, yeah, if we all have bad days. I have a bad day, you have bad days. So we're allowed bad days. And I think if you allowed a person to have a bad day instead of making it worse, you can have a better day.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yes. Um, so you, in your practice, and then I think you sound like you're trying to understand the person, the needs as much as possible, even though in the situation where it's the lack of information given for the person, just knowing the person as much as you can.
It is, and I mean, like the wandering hours, we call the wandering hours, come 7 o'clock, everyone in the afternoon shift, they'll be like, oh my gosh. And it'd be quite simply, well, what do they want? What are they looking for? What are they needing? So why don't we put the TV on in the lounge room in one corner, and why don't we put music on? Good old Bing Crosby was very popular. We put a CD on, maybe people just want something to gravitate to, and they'd gravitate to their TV, because in the evening, what would they do? They'd sit in there and watch their news, or we'd have the music, or they'd want to walk, and I'd go, oh my goodness. And I'd walk with them, or I'd say, oh, my legs are getting tired. Are your legs getting tired? Oh, my legs are so tired. I said, should we sit down and watch the news for 10 minutes? Instead of saying, would you go sit down, Betty? This is really annoying, you're bothering everyone. And that's how people would talk at them. And I used to, yes, okay, Betty is going in everyone's door, and that's really annoying. And I'd say, Betty, my legs are so tired. Are yours tired? Oh, good. Let's go up to lounge. And then I'd put music on, and you could see if Betty liked the music, she would concentrate, or I'd give her some crocheting, or I'd give her, would you like a newspaper? And if they start flicking, okay, that person's happy at the moment. This is what they used to do in the evening. Because I think we don't know what a person did when they went home, unless we have their partner to say, we used to sit home, have tea, watch the news, and we'd read the paper. But if we didn't know a person did that, and they're wandering around getting really confused, maybe they're looking for their lounge room to sit in their chair, to put the TV on, to get a newspaper. So giving everyone a title doesn't really help them. So trying to see how we can help them. And it doesn't mean it's going to work tomorrow. Betty's not going to sit down tomorrow. She's going to go and change, or maybe she's just needing the toilet. So let's go find that. So instead of getting cranky, you just kind of have to, yeah, talking to someone with respect versus talking at someone is completely different.
Hmm, I see. Um, let's talk a little bit more about the altered realities.
Mm-hmm.
Have you learned any strategies from your colleagues or professionals or anyone else?
Um, in a workplace, it is starting to change, and I'm really grateful for that. The biggest problem is when you're in a work, you're time poor. You have so many residents, and I mean they are there. You've got these residents or clients, depending on which place you're working, and you have to make sure that they're showered, dressed, have the and all that's in. And if you've got Tom who's wandering and is in the bathroom deciding to shower fully clothed, that makes everything really, really, really hard. And because if you spend time with Tom and you spend extra half an hour with Tom, then you've got 7 other people that haven't showered, or haven't had their tablets, or haven't had the So it is really, really hard. If you can't, sometimes you can find some carers work better with other people. And I think sometimes it's tone, the way someone talks, but also the way someone comes in. If you've got a really, really tall, overwhelming people, some people don't like that. Or as if you have a really short, bubbly people, some people don't like that. So sometimes if you pay attention to which carers or support workers work better with the person, is it because that person's really cool and they're really funny and really happy? Or is it because is that person representing something? Is that person like their sister, like their mother, like their brother? And then if you can work out what it is that person is calming at them for, then you can try to implement it yourself. So, yeah, I think time is the biggest issue in any residential thing. The best part is when you're supporting someone in their own home, because you have things to draw on. You have their own familiarity, and you have the things, but also you've got to get that person cared for in bed, because you've still got to go to someone else's house. So no, you can't treat everyone the same, and you also can't treat the same person the same every day. You can try it, and it might work in 3 days' time, but it might not work tomorrow, and it might not work this afternoon when you go back.
I see.
Yeah.
Just a little bit of clarification I would like to have. You said the things start improving in your workplace. What do you mean by this?
So when a person is when a person's less agitated, when a person's less frustrated. Usually you can hear by tone the way a person will speak and their body language. You know, when they've got their walkers and they're banging, that's a really good indication that they're not very happy. Versus a person who's still walking, but they've got a calm voice and they're not banging. Yes, they're still pacing, but it means we've de-escalated that situation to where someone might get attacked or someone might get hurt, or they might have to be, you know, restrained or sedated because they've worked up. To versus is it really hurting anyone? Is it really bothering anyone? Is this really something that has to be dealt with aggressively, or is this something we can work around? If this is going to be 7 to 7:30 every night, but then after 8 o'clock we settle, is this something we can live with for that hour that we can work around so the doors aren't open and people's spaces aren't invaded? Can we work around this? Mm-hmm. So I think that's better than quickly getting them in the shower, getting them in their room and putting the TV on because the doors are too hard for them to open. So, yeah.
So the practice is improving, you
think? It is improving. And also people are coming in to work because they want to work now, whereas before it was a job and people just needed a job because their kids are grown up, or it paid more than Coles. Say that, you know, back at the day, it used to be, the phrase was it pays more than Coles to be aged care. I'm like, oh, that's probably not the best reason to have the job. Whereas a lot of people care a lot more now. I think it's just the fact that a lot of people quite often come into aged care because they've been burnt out from other industries. So you've had nursing staff that's been in a hospital or a very high-paced place for a very long time. They come into aged care and they're almost burnt out. So it's very hard to have staff that's burnt out and just they don't have an energy, you know. It's just like, you know exactly where they're going to be. Yeah, so it's changing, and education's a wonderful thing, but when you put in a room with 30 people and you watch a spreadsheet or have someone tell you what you're doing versus showing evidence-based, which is it's probably the best thing now. A lot of training's all online, nearly everything's online, but having real life evidence-based, not you must do this, or when you get in the morning, this is what you don't do, which is pretty much what you're taught, what you don't do. Whereas you're showing different examples of Betty, and this is what you could do, you know, if this is happening, what is it doing, what can we do, and breaking it down in a very calm way. And so then it makes it easy for a person to do. Whereas you go in and you're one of 30 people and you've got someone telling you what to do, you don't take that in as much because you're looking at your watch and you know you've still got 3 residents to do and you haven't got time. So the way it's taught, the way someone teaches, that's helping.
Would you like to have a yap? Oh, okay, that's good that you got a tea next to you. I think I've asked you all the questions that we have prepared. The last one is just about your any other thoughts about this topic. Have you any this experience change how you think, care about, you know, like a truth intimate care settings, or what advice would you give to someone else going into this working industry or having that situations? Any other thoughts? Yeah.
Always, whoever the person you're working with, if it's not your family, always thinking of them is how would I like to be treated if it was me, or how would I like my mum or dad to be treated, because that was what I did. I wouldn't like my nan being spoken. Well, when I was younger, I wouldn't like my nan being spoken to. I didn't want like my grandfather because my grandfather had been in aged care. So I was always like, I didn't like when that person treated my grandfather like that. Or so you come in and you make it personal in your own way. How would you like your mother, your grandfather, or how would you like to be treated? How would you like to be spoken to? How would you like? And once you put that in and make it semi-personal, make it more a relationship versus me do, you know, make a personal connection in that way. And you're making a relationship, you're supporting that person at the time. You're not just caring, you're caring for them. You're not just doing. So actually realize that you're actually caring for a person, because sometimes people just do their work and they don't actually realize that they're actually caring. They're just doing their job. And I think doing your job versus caring for someone is completely different. It might be doing exactly the same things, but it's a much better way to support someone. And I think the best the best thing is if it is getting too hard and you're getting upset, just walk away, give yourself 2 seconds. Sometimes you might have already had a bad day and you're coming into work and life's already hard. Take a moment to go get a drink of water or go to the toilet. Remove yourself, because if you're going in and doing one person after another person after another person and you're working with a carer you don't like, or in a wing that you don't like, or this person that you don't like, or it's really hard and you're sometimes those pressures build up, and if you've already had a bad day, you're going to have a bad day, but your job still has to get done. So if you're having a really bad day, give yourself a couple seconds, excuse yourself, get a drink, walk back, try to leave your home at home, try to leave that resident that you had a problem with last week, forget that problem and just deal with it, and deal with one person at a time completely fresh. That will help the shift go better, and that will help that person, and it will help you. You'll have a much better day if you can go in and see that person as a fresh face, as a fresh situation, not just like, oh, I've got that person again, or, oh, I've got 3 more people. Go in and 100% at that moment is that person and it's you. Go in with a caring attitude, go in with a friendly attitude. You don't have to talk. Some people don't like being spoken to. Think about if you were lying in that bed or you needed someone to dress you because you've had an accident, how you'd feel, and go from there. Because where they are right now is where they are, and it's where you might be one day. So, yeah, it makes it easier.
Mm. So your advice is even the people who work there in the aged care. So I just want to put this information into the context of altered realities.
Mm-hmm.
When the residents or clients or consumers or family members experience a different world.
Yeah.
Does is there any message you want to give it to them? Any advice, give it to them? In a particular the context of altered realities.
It's okay. Just tell them it's okay, because right now this is where they are. And instead of trying to get them to be where you are, try to be where they are. You don't have to walk in front of them. You don't have to hold their hand. Be beside them in their now. Accept their now. Believe their now is now, and work with them that way. And it's okay if their now is different from yours. It is. It's okay for it to be different. You don't have to see it. You just have to be with it. You sit with them with it. Let it become your now. Yeah.
If
If you,
somebody said, "Oh, that's a dishonest, that's lying," what would you say to them?
but not to them. It's not a
Mm.
lie to them. So if it's not a lie to them, just because I can't see that spider doesn't mean it's not real. It just means that right now there's a spider that I can't see, but there's a spider there. So who am I to say that they're right? Who am I to say that they're wrong? What if I was colorblind and someone told me that was a green tree and I couldn't see green? Am I a liar to say, no, it's not? So that's how I look at it. We all look at things differently. I'm a shorter person. I'm looking at that tree. I'm going to see differently to that tall person who can see bird in it. I'll say, there's no bird. I can't see bird. So I think when you accept, you don't have to agree. That's the thing. You don't have to agree. Yes, 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 there's a spider there. Yes, you don't have to make things. But at the moment, okay, there is a spider. Accept that spider's there. Is it, yeah, doesn't have to be real to you to be real. It really doesn't have to be real to you to be real. And once it's real to them, it's real, and that's all you need. It's not a lie. It's not a lie. It's just their reality. And if you can deal with their reality and accept it, you can work with them and you can work through it. But if you're pulling that reality or you're pushing yours, that's it's cruel. It's really cruel, and it's unkind, and we don't want to be unkind. We want to be supportive. And so right now that's where they are. That's where they are. That simply. It's
Mm.
not that hard. Don't overthink it.
Do you have any term or like a phrase to describe that one? Like, I'm just wondering, it's just alter realities is a term that we have used, but is there any term that from your practical perspective that we could implement or we could consider? Or if it's too hard, then it's okay. I
No,
just to come. Yeah, I just
no,
want to ask you.
it's just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Mm,
It's really it is. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Just because you can't hear it, just because you don't believe it, doesn't mean it's not real.
mm,
It is. I've seen people believe that something is so real that that's 100% what it is. And, I can look 100 million ways and not see that thing there. But if they see it's real and that's their life and that's where their vision is, then my vision will meet their vision. I will make my vision meet their vision. Yeah. No, I haven't got a good catchphrase. If my daughter was here, she would, but
No,
it's really good luck.
no, there are a lot of points you made, and thank you so much for your time. Um, Very rich experience, and we are very lucky to have you actually in the field.
Oh no, it's just yeah, things have changed and I'm really glad that people aren't, aged care 30 years ago, which or just over 30 years ago obviously wasn't the same. 40 years ago when my grandfather was in nursing homes, they had 12-bed wards. When I started coming in, we had 8-bed wards. It went to 4-bed wards, went to 2-bed wards, and now we don't call them wards.
And
So it's really wonderful. But the thing is, conditions are still there, whether they were there 30 years ago, and it's really all attitudes. A good attitude can make, a good attitude can make all the difference to someone that day, and that's what you need. We're making a difference. A good attitude couldn't go without it.
thank you. That's a really nice way to end today's interview. So thank you so much for your sharing your experiences with us. If you have uh, missed anything, oh, Sunny, I should have mentioned this one earlier or something, then, just you can reach out to us anytime. But but you spend 1 hour with us. This is quite wonderful. A lot to learn from. Yeah.
Uh, oh look, I've just lived more life than some of the people that have. That's all, and I've seen things, and yes, if you can care for someone who's your family, or you can care for someone and you care them as your family,
Mm.
that's all you need to do. Changing a mindset's a lot easier than people realize. It really is. But thank you. Good luck.
Thank you so much to Christy. Thank you.
Thank
Um, I'm,
you. You just
I'm
end the
going to
meeting, do you?
stop the recording now.